So it's November, the month of Remembrance Sunday, of bonfire night, of fireworks, Guy Fawkes, poppies. I'll miss this day, remembering our fallen. And what does Keir Starmer of the Labour Party lead with?
This Islamophobia Awareness Month comes at a deeply troubling time for Muslim communities across Britain. We've seen a devastating rise in Islamophobia, leaving people feeling fearful and unsafe in their own country.
So November has been designated Islamophobia Awareness Month.
Are you serious?
Obviously October is Black History Month. The alphabet people have got their month. There are other months available, but they chose November. Why? Well, I suspect it is to detract and cause as much insult as possible to the act of remembrance, which obviously takes place on the 11th and the Sunday closest to the 11th. I can be accused of many things for saying such despicable things, Islamophobic being one, but I ask you this about the organisers of this event. It's been going 10 years, so it was established as Daesh, Islamic State, ISIL, call them what you will. It was established at a point in time where they were on the rise and just establishing their caliphate in Iraq and Syria. And initially they used this symbol, the organisers of this event, to symbolise Islamic Awareness Month. They used this hand gesture, which also happens to be an Islamist gesture used by Daesh fighters in Iraq and Syria. Coincidence? I don't think so. But then again, I'm just an Islamophobe.
This Islamophobia Awareness Month comes at a deeply troubling time for Muslim communities across Britain. We've seen a devastating rise in Islamophobia, leaving people feeling fearful and unsafe in their own country.
A devastating rise in Islamophobia? Really, Keir? At this time? You're coming out with this? At a time when we've had weeks of demonstrations in our cities, thousands of people waving Palestinian flags, some of whom shouting death to the Jews and various other insults. Anti-Semitic insults, Jewish schools having to close, synagogues graffitied, Jewish shops being attacked, occupations of train stations. And you're coming out with this right now, you're painting Muslims as a victim all of a sudden.
I've heard firsthand of women wearing hijab who are too scared to travel by public transport, of Muslim families being abused as they leave the mosque. Hate crimes are deeply damaging, both for every affected victim, but for communities. And we all bear a responsibility to do all we can to stamp out hate. The surge in Islamophobia is simply appalling. Muslim women and girls disproportionately targeted, mosques forced to ramp up security, and British Muslims questioned as if they are terrorists.
At some of these demonstrations, you know, we've seen people shouting death to the Jews and various other anti-Semitic insults, but you're telling us that Muslims are the victim.
Simply appalling.
The police actually stopped some Jewish activists who were driving around with an electronic billboard, told them to switch it off and leave the area.
We're just driving around, we've been doing it this week and we're driving around London. These are also kids who've been kidnapped by Hamas. You've just told him to turn that off. You've just told them to turn that off. Why are the police holding me back and telling them to turn the vans off? Why are they doing that?
Talk to them in a second.
And yet the Met Police allows this other much larger group of protesters to do pretty much what they like.
Have your flags, just not on the barriers, that's it.
And yet when they march down with hundreds of Palestinian flags, you won't say a word.
Once you went past hanging out of the car, you never see fuck all. There's way more of them than there is of us.
But you're telling us, Sir Keir, that Muslims are the victim.
Simply appalling.
We saw a guy in London arrested by the police because he filmed a video and put it on social media showing the Palestinian flags in Bethnal Green, and basically said that he didn't like it, he didn't feel that they belonged, that this was a scene that belonged in this country, and he was arrested for that.
These are disgusting. I'm a stage 4 cancer patient and I need to here. Make a scene of shoes, make the scene, you're arresting him because he said something in the street about Hamas, a terrorist organisation. You haven't been round the block, you don't know what you're talking about. Look at the cops! Look at all the cops!
Embarrassing.
Embarrassing. Because he mentioned Palestine!
British Muslims questioned as if they are terrorists. As if they are terrorists. They are terrorists. All in an environment of a Tory government that thinks that their divisive language and policy don't matter. They would rather stoke division than bring communities together. I do not want Britain to be a place where British Muslims are not able to be their whole selves, where they feel they must hide or tone down who they are for fear of being attached to views that are not their own, where they're asked to apologise for the actions of people who do not act in their name. Our Britain is one where the enormous contributions of British Muslims are recognised and celebrated, their stories heard, their lives free from discrimination.
Hide or tone down who they are.
Are you serious?
As leader of the Labour Party, I am indebted to the contributions of Muslim members, activists and politicians who make our party what it is today. I'd like to thank Muslim organisations and mosques who work tirelessly to raise awareness and shine a light on the scale of Islamophobia. My Labour Party is committed to work closely with all communities to ensure they have the security they need to feel safe. A Labour government will tackle religious discrimination and racism across society. We cannot allow community cohesion in our country to be destroyed. If Labour is elected to form Britain's next government, we will be a government for everyone, one that unites, not divides.
Starmer talks about community cohesion and uniting and not dividing, etc. We know what Labour politicians mean when they use these words, and they mean to assuage the values and opinions and feelings of one violent minority to the detriment of a peaceful majority. And in this case, overwhelmingly ordinary working class British people who are seeing in their towns and cities the devastating impacts of uncontrolled mass immigration and the parallel societies that have grown up as a result, a direct result of this decades-old policy. And Labour, make no mistake, mean to bring in more people to build those communities even further in order that they get the votes that those people are guaranteed until there is a clash. And herein lies the problem. This is why Starmer's produced this video now. He's trying to make amends for his stance on Israel and Palestine, one which has upset the majority of his party. So Keir Starmer member of the establishment has to toe the establishment line, and that is a pro-Israeli stance. He refuses to call for any kind of ceasefire in Gaza, which has sparked huge backlash from members of his party, from his MPs, from mayors such as Khan and Burnham, and the support base that Labour relies on in inner city areas that are now occupied by swathes of Muslim voters. Such is Starmer's desperation to appeal to the Muslim community that he produced this video without wearing one of these, in fear of offending his target audience. Martin Daubney alluded to this missing poppy as he interviewed one of Labour's front benchers on GB News, pointing out that Starmer was apparently wearing the same suit earlier in the day with a poppy, and then appeared later in the day to address the Muslim community without it.
But it's about the suffering that we're seeing. It's not about the Labour Party.
Well, Bridget, it is about the Labour Party because I think it's a lack of clarity. I mean, you echoed Sir Keir Starmer's position of Israel's right to defend itself, but that's not a position echoed by 350 of your councillors, including ministers and members of Parliament. And this rolled on yesterday, didn't it? Because Sir Keir Starmer gave a speech when he was wearing a poppy. And then moments later, he gave a speech where he was talking about Islamophobia, where he'd removed that poppy. Why is it that your leader views it as appropriate to wear a poppy when speaking to one audience and not when speaking to another audience in case it offends them?
Look, I just completely reject that. Keir Starmer proudly supports our armed forces and involves himself in those remembrance services and events across our country every single year. So I just flatly reject any suggestion that Keir Starmer acted in that way. He is very proud to back our armed forces and also to recognise the contribution that millions of people have made right throughout our history in giving us the freedoms today that we all enjoy, which does involve the freedom of expression, the freedom to protest that people fought for.
And she's quite right about the people that fought and died for our freedoms. And all we ask in return is 2 days a year. Not even 2 days. Just 4 minutes across those 2 days. To remember, to honour the sacrifices of those who died for our freedoms. But to have those precious moments of national mourning disrupted by pro-Palestinian protesters who, let's be honest, with the left on one side, Islamists on the other, they both despise this country. And to have them disrupt just a couple of minutes on Armistice Day is unacceptable.